Hi, everybody. Greetings, 82. Welcome.
Hi, Tom.
Welcome. Thank you all for being here. Thank you for staying out of the thunderstorm. Then I'm glad we didn't have to add to this list. So here's how, this is our memorial event. If you were looking for the Dave Spergel talk, you missed it. It was great, apparently. I had to miss it, too. So thank you very much for coming. Multiple thank yous to my co-chair, Lael, Melville, for bringing us all together, helping bring us all together here. Let me explain very quickly, and I realize there's a lot of us in the room. We want to be as reflective, but also as celebratory as we're all comfortable being. Here's how we're going to honor our classmates that are no longer with us. We lost 12 since the 35th reunion, and they're on your program, and we're going to go through them in the order here, with one exception, which I'll explain. A couple of the names have changed, and we'll get there as we go. A couple of us are suddenly tested positive. I'm glad everybody's fine. Marshall Merrifield is going to be totally fine, but to his great credit, he decided that testing positive meant he shouldn't show up. So that's a good thing. For those of you who are on the list to speak, this is a microphone. We're not amplifying. We don't need to. It's a small enough room. But we are recording it for everybody that cannot be here. So I will hand this around, and please hand it to if you're one of the first speakers of the 12. When we're done remembering the 12, I'd invite any classmate to stand and remember any of the classmates. The back of the program is the list of all the classmates that cannot be with us. And I invite any of you to say anything you want that you'd want to remember about your time with them here or after, or some cases even before. So we will go in order, except that Mark Rifkin is going to go first because he has other reunion duties and we can't keep him from those. So I'm now going to hand the ceremonial microphone to Mark Rifkin.
Thank you, Tom. Thank you. Our classmate Kevin Swasser passed away unexpectedly on August 12, 2020. Kevin and I played alongside each other on the football team where he was a fellow offensive lineman and a loyal teammate. As an offensive lineman, Kevin did all the hard work while our teammates scored all the touchdowns, which was a particularly fitting role for a quiet and unassuming man like Kevin. Kevin was an especially gifted horseshoe player, once throwing a double ringer on top of a double ringer on top of a double ringer, which apparently is quite an accomplishment, to win the Tiger Inn championship. Kevin was especially proud of being an engineering student at Princeton. Kevin filled the hallway of the E-Quad. Literally filled the hallway of the E-Quad. He filled the entire height and width of the corridors. As befitting a Princeton engineer, after graduating, Kevin had a long and successful career at Lockheed Martin, where he worked for more than 25 years. Among his many other accomplishments, he was the chief architect for Lockheed's K-MAX unmanned aircraft system and its combat search and rescue program. Kevin attained the prestigious title of Fellow, which is an honor that is bestowed on less than 0.5% of all technical workforce. Kevin's kindness and enthusiasm knew no bounds. Chris Long, one of Kevin's roommates and also a fellow football teammate, shared this about him. With a big body, a bigger heart, and mischievous sense of humor, he was great fun to be with, even as we commiserated about our school workload and our lack of social life, while listening to the 10,000-watt stereo system he built himself. Another one of Kevin's roommates and fellow teammates, Mike Schiller, recalled the light speakers that Kevin built to go along with the 10,000-watt stereo system. They flashed different colored lights in keeping with the music being played. Kevin was also very proud of being a member of Tiger Inn. He took his role as T.I.'s house manager very seriously. All his fellow TI members knew they could always count on having a safe house, having a clean pool table, and plenty of cold beer on tap. Mike Schiller also recalled how Kevin much genuinely enjoyed sitting on TI's front porch with his close friends and fellow officers, listening to the George Dickel Band play a particular song, "Drugs Aren't Good, They Are Bad." I don't know if George is here. Is George?
Tomorrow after 4
Okay.
o'clock.
Well, there you go. Kevin liked the song so much that he asked for it to be played at his wake. So thank you to George Kilby. Kevin was a soft-spoken, brilliant, and intense family man. He was especially admired as a friend, a classmate, and a colleague. We will miss him greatly. Who goes next? Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't see. Forgive me.
Thanks, buddy.
You got it.
Good job.
Thanks. I didn't see anybody. Thank you, sir.
Hey, everybody. Bruce and I are going to speak jointly for Mark Basham. First, we wanted to share with you some words and remembrances from some of Mark's closest friends at Princeton. If I can hold this together. Vividly remembered by almost everyone were these: that smile and the sparkle in his eyes, the wonderful laugh, the buoyant and indomitable spirit, his love for debate and passion for making his argument, his sly smiles and those dimples. He could get away with almost anything. He was quick with a quip and had generosity of spirit. He was a welcoming son of Santa Fe. What I remember, his athleticism and grace on the football field, and he ran like the wind. And finally, this is from Stan Freck, which I think is just lovely, and so I'm going to quote directly. The hammer, always passionate, whether on a football field or in a friendly debate, always on point with his soft-spoken, dry wit, needling whoever needed it most at the moment, like all of us at some point or another. And always, always with a smile that lit up the room he was in, the world at large, and all of us lucky enough to call him our friend and brother. Much love.
I'm just going to, because we're at reunions, I'm going to add a little reunion anecdote about Mark to what David said. We struggled for years to get Mark back to reunions. And finally, the 25th, we dragged him here, right? Literally, dragged him here. He was a true Santa Fe kid. He didn't want to leave. He went back immediately after school. And he finally came for the 25th, which was great. And, you know, I mean, that smile again, those eyes, everything we could see, he was exactly the same. So David mentioned his passion for debate. It was late at night, one of the nights, Friday, Saturday, I'm not sure which it was. We were in one of those debates. And I said, I really miss this. And, you know, how come you don't come to New York more often? Or how come you don't come to reunions? And he looked at me and he said, how many times have you been to Santa Fe? So he called me out, and I had to answer the bell. So that October, I went to Santa Fe, and boy, I tell you what, if you thought he was fun here, you should have seen him in his element, because it didn't matter whether we were at the diner, whether we were at a restaurant, whether we were at an art gallery, wherever you went with Mark Basham when you were in Santa Fe, everybody knew him. And the place lit up when he walked in. He was an attorney there for years. He was a judge, and that was his home. And you know what? He grew up there. He passed away there. He spent 4 years here, but he went right back. And I tell you what, there is nothing like seeing him when he was in Santa Fe and really seeing that come out. So it was a special week for me. We spent the 4 days in Santa Fe and then a couple days up at his cabin in the mountains, and it was pretty spectacular with my family, and to be able to spend that time with him was something I'll never forget. So he, as Dave said, special guy, and we will all miss him dearly. So.
All right, I'm going to tag team with Andy Russell. Come on up here, Andy. So Ray, if you didn't know Ray Clapp, we called him Clapper, which was very fitting for, being at Princeton. But Ray was born in San Antonio. He passed away last December from COVID, of all things. But we were just meant to be best friends. We both played lightweight football. We were both chemical engineers. We were both in cottage. As engineers, we always had 9 a.m. classes, and I would go by and knock on the window and grab Ray. We would go over to cottage. We'd get breakfast. We'd go over to the E-Quad, and it was just like having a brother. Neither one of us were very attractive to the women, so we had each other, which helped a lot. But anyway, Ray was a great father. He was in Dallas. We live in Dallas. My wife Lydia and I raised 2 fine sons. His wife sort of disappeared earlier in their marriage, and he raised 2 fantastic boys, and then remarried Mary Ann and started a new life back in 2013. Funny story. He didn't like, and this is Ray. He didn't like paying for parking. So the parking meter out in front of cottage, he really, really didn't like. And so over the course of about 7 nights, he got a hacksaw, and we would go out there and we would saw about an inch off through the pipe. And if it's like reinforced steel filled with concrete, filled with a steel pole in the middle. And we would just take a little off every night, go back to the tap room, have a few more beers. And then finally we got it off, and then we didn't know what to do with it, because this thing weighs a ton, and it's got money in it. And so, but Ray had that parking meter. I don't know what he did with it at the end. But all right, Boo Boo, what do you got?
Well, I'll finish the parking meter story. So after the meter came off, Ray comes up to our room, and so Ray, Steve McGee, and I were roommates. He comes up to the room with a blanket and something in the blanket. I'm like, Ray, what are you holding? He goes, I got the meter. It was like a mob hit. Happened right in front of cottage. So we affectionately always used to joke with him about that. But Steve and I were 2 New Jersey kids living with a Texas guy who taught us everything we needed to know about hot peppers, from jalapenos to habaneros, and made sure that we lost every race. And we had such great memories of Ray. And as a Texan, he also never minded driving to a good party. So right out of school, he was working in Pulaski, Virginia for Hercules Chemical, and I was living in Baltimore, and I had a party, and he said, sure, I'll come tonight. Ray, it's 5 hours away. He goes, I'm from Texas. That's no big deal. So we all love him. His boys, we have some pictures that his boys sent me, and his oldest son, Race, named after him, said to me, he goes, the only thing I wish I found was that naked picture of him getting dunked into the fountain at cottage. An old tradition on your birthday. Needless to say, we all have smiles on our face. It's so sad to lose him, but anyone who knew him knew he was a special person.
All right, thank you. Put that right there.
David Bernstein.
There we go.
For
So I'm speaking about Nicholas Clifford. The eulogy is actually by Andres Ilves, who is working in the nation's service and the service of all nations for Radio Free Liberty in Europe. For Nicholas Clifford, it's written by Andres Ilves, who's in Prague, in the service of all nations, and for Radio Free Europe and Liberty. He's unable to be here today, so I'm reading it on his behalf. If you know Andres, please imagine it's his voice instead of mine. Very few of us get to craft the life that we want, to have a dream and then live it. Nicholas Clifford was one of those rare few. Nicholas was a man driven by passion and a zest for life. Those of us who were lucky enough to know him never had any doubt as to the three governing passions of his all too short time among us. The first was, of course, trains. Big, small, fast, slow, the dinky and the Trans-Siberian Railway. All were equally important to him. Nicholas was the person you could call in the middle of the night because your train had been canceled, whether you were in Berlin, Vermont, or the other Berlin, in Peoria or in Paris, and he could piece together an alternative route from memory without consulting the Thomas Cook Rail timetable. If it was on tracks and moved people, Nicholas cared deeply about it. Which brings us to his second great passion, France and French culture, cuisine, people, and the French language, which he spoke more fluently than many native French speakers. Nicholas moved to Paris in his 20s and never looked back. He lived a French life, a truly Parisian life, and found a home and started a family there. And then there was his other great passion, wine. Having spent part of his youth in the French wine country, Nicholas went on to develop a knowledge of wine that surpassed that of all but a precious few enophiles on earth, able to match any dish you could name to a particular obscure vintage. Nicholas managed to craft a life that drew together these three passions, launching a travel and tour company that introduced Europe to thousands of people, mostly North Americans, opening their eyes and their minds to new experiences and new ways of viewing the world. Nobody who spent any time around Nicholas was left in any doubt to his views, be it on French or US politics, or, of course, Amtrak. Nicholas lived. A force to be reckoned with a giant intellect and boundless energy, a gourmet with refined taste who was also down to earth, and spent much of the year on a bicycle, sharing his passions with the people lucky enough to join one of his tours, which crisscrossed all of Europe. He left us suddenly and unexpectedly last November, leaving behind his wife Laura and two daughters whom he loved dearly. Nicholas changed lives, and we are all the poorer for his departure.
As Tom mentioned, Marshall could not be here. He tested positive. So filling in here, a couple of the roommates, myself and Doug Borchard. And we have, in classic Marshall, we got the call last night. So we're working off some material that is relatively new to us. But anyway, Nick was an entrepreneur, an engineer, brilliant consultant, business school professor, and a real believer and passionate person in many, many causes. But above all else, he was a really wonderful friend to many.
Once you're a friend of Nick's, you're a friend forever. And he never forgot anything about you or his friendship that he had with you. And even if you hadn't seen each other in a while, he always insisted on having some catch-up time and never hesitated to share his updating story. And given all he was doing in his life, it was always amazing and wonderful that he could take the time to do the small things that friends do for him. You always felt like you were the only one in the world at that moment.
Couldn't leave this out. Nick was the manager of the football team from sophomore year to senior year. And I think he loved that role at Princeton more than any other role he had. He organized the trips to Yale, Dartmouth, Harvard, and West Point, getting the hotels and the restaurants and the buses and directions for the bus drivers before there was nav on your phone, even before there were cell phones. He did it all from an office in Jadwin Gymnasium or our dorm room with computers, printouts, clipboards, managing the football secretaries and all that. Can you imagine managing the food for a 10-game college schedule? These were great meals, I understand. Obviously, those of us who didn't play didn't get them. 5-hour-long bus rides, 8-hour bus rides. How did he do this? Clearly, Nick's leadership and corporate governance skills were already on display, and of course, his love of entertaining his friends around a meal. If you ever got invited to have a meal at Nick's house in Livingston, New Jersey, hosted by Nick and his mom, then you understood why and how Nick knew how to host a great meal, and for large groups of large people. It was an all-afternoon event, eating at Mama Donatello's, watching a game on TV, and having a great time. She took every one of Nick's friends in his family, much like Nick took everyone in as his friend. And we all really grew to appreciate Nick and his whole family because he shared them so much. It's no wonder that a 20-year-old managing a $200,000 budget, preparing an entire college football team to have a winning season, would go on to run business, manage Bill Bradley's Senate campaign, or become a leading expert in running large corporations. I think it all started with the logistics of hosting large meals in Mama Donatello's kitchen. Maybe that's a little simplistic way to make the facts fit the story. But at his service here just about 4 years ago, given the number of people who came out from the football team and the coaches, you could see they really had an impact there.
Of course, Nick was also our senior class president and put in a huge amount of effort and time and care on behalf of our class, all while holding down a rigorous engineering schedule. He organized that senior year about 100 of us to help with all the activities he led, including a host of graduation events. He even had a steering committee that governed the other committees, and was probably the first college kid who'd ever heard of a steering committee or knew what a steering committee should do. But he taught us and led us through a tremendously collaborative and inclusive form of governance, working with a sizable class budget for that year, resulting in one of the great years for all of us. Nick went on to start and build a successful new media marketing company, advising senior executives from some of the world's largest media companies for over 25 years. He also found time to work with his brother to run a California vineyard, making great Pinots, named after his family. At the time of his passing, he'd been teaching at Stanford Business School, his other alma mater, for several years, teaching what else? Corporate governance. He was also just returning from his first meeting as a member of the Sony Corporation board in the weeks before he passed. But Nick was not just driven from a corporate or capitalist perspective. He had deep passions and stood up for what he believed in and put his skills to work there. One cause, among others, that he helped to victory was the establishment of gay marriage in California. He brought all the skills from our class, his time as Bill Bradley's press secretary, to be consequential in the campaign's leadership between 2007 and 2010. So Nick, we know by now that St. Peter has given you carte blanche to reorganize heaven. No doubt there is a steering committee and several standing committees and an ad hoc committee or two. The angels and archangels all know who to ask for clarification on their roles and Robert's rules. And we're sure it is a far better place because of you, just like it was down here, where we all miss you so very much. Thank you, Marshall.
Thank you, Marshall. Judy?
Thanks, Eric. Yep. Thank you. Mary, thanks, Judy.
Ann O'Connor Hutchins, whom we knew affectionately as Anno, passed away just a few days ago after a long illness. She is survived by her mother, Pat O'Connor, her siblings, John, Rick, and Patty, her husband, Tony Hutchins, and her children, Max, Blaine, and Maggie. Ann grew up in West Hartford, Connecticut. She and Tony met when they were both teaching in San Antonio, Texas. We had talked a lot about Ann and Tony in San Antonio. It's very poetic. They got married and moved to Vermont, where they raised their kids. Tony was a public defender, and Ann taught school and sang in singing groups. At Princeton, Ann majored in comparative literature and was a member of the Tiger Lilies. She had a really lovely voice. One of my favorite things to do at Princeton was going to hear her in the Lilies at Arch Sings. She was the soloist for Only Yesterday, which she sang for me and my husband at the dinner the night before our wedding. Ann was smart, beautiful, warm, and a friend you could count on. She was a great hugger. Her smile would light up a room. She was really tall. She had a wicked sense of humor and was a lot of fun to be around. Ann was part of a group of us who lived together in various combinations during our time in Princeton. Since college, we have gotten together at the major reunions and periodically in between. Unfortunately, most of us couldn't make it to reunions this year, so I say on behalf of Allison Moore, Betsy Whitehead Seaton, Holin Sue Wallace, Tracy Mills, Susan Blaxell Deal, Susan Sheps Margulies, and Martha McCulley, we loved Anno and we miss her terribly. May her memory be a blessing.
I find it fitting that it's raining, don't you? There's something fitting about it being raining. And with the lightning and thunder in the background, a quiet storm rages in us as we remember our friends and loved ones in this way. I'm remembering today Lillian Tucker Johnson, and I would like to remember her in a different way. She had certainly accolades from her job and from her business and from things she did in her life. But today I'd like to remember her as a friend. I've written some things and read them over and over, but today I choose to share with you what I've written on my heart about her. So there are a couple of us in the room today that loved Lillian in a profound way. That includes her roommates, and I know you guys, so just stand briefly and then you can sit right back down. Thank you, Jackie. Thank you, Sandy. We have so many fun memories of Lillian. Mine started with when we went to high school together, and then we decided we would do Princeton together, and that was a big decision because there really just weren't many of us that looked like us. But still we went. And it was joyous, joyous, joyous in that we could do hard things together. So now I just really want to fast forward. And while there's so much to celebrate about how she loved clean teeth and how peppers and onions made her burp, but what I really want to focus on is the privilege of being with her during periods of her transition. And then I point to my friend Chris for that too. How we got to sit with her in the days as things were winding down. How we got to talk about things that were really relevant and really important. And how they added context to the life that we were trying to live in what days were left. And so as we sat one day in the dark in her room, and she said, "No lights on, please." She said, "You know, in this moment, I feel a little bit afraid." And what we decided together was that we get to do things afraid. So as my friend Lillian went home to meet God, I would share this scripture with you because I think it is fitting for her. Therefore, with minds that are alert and fully sober, set your hope on the grace to be brought to you when your love for God is revealed in His coming and in your going to Him. She loved God in profound ways. Her faith was unwavering. And so when we sat in those last days and we got to talk about God and read scripture together, there was comfort to find in those words and the life that we got to share. So in remembering her today, I'd like for you to remember these three things. While we get to do great things and have had great opportunities set before us as alumni of Princeton, probably the greatest thing we could do is to be a wonderful friend. Number two, I'd like for you to remember this, that while we move in and out of different spaces, maybe the most important space is the one by a bedside. And then finally, what I'd like for you to remember about our friend Lillian is that her faith was unwavering. What will you have faith in when those moments of facing fear come before you? Thanks.
Just hold it like this.
Yeah, you just hold it anywhere. You don't have to speak anywhere.
I'm honored to share memories of our friend and classmate, Ann Kirschner, who crossed through the veil on the winter solstice of last year. She was living in San Francisco, where she'd been since 1987, and had met and married her wife of many years, artist Julia Kay. Ann graduated from the School of Architecture, and I was reminded today that her thesis project was a zoo. She received her master's in architecture from Princeton in 1987. I met Ann in the architecture studio. We didn't like each other very much. More on that in a minute. Nancy Hendrickson and I were roommates in San Francisco after Princeton, and Ann and Nancy were good friends. So I have some of Nancy's memories to share with you today. I will always remember Ann Kirschner's loud and infectious laugh. She could be heard from far away. She was funny, wry, and sly, to quote her friend and classmate David Todd, and she was very, very kind. Ann's wife, Julia, told me that during Ann's last trip to the hospital, she made a spreadsheet of all the nurses who had helped her during the ordeal so she could send them each chocolates on Valentine's Day, which Julia did after Ann had died. Ann had an amazing design sense. She approached design as a puzzle and always found the right solution. As a kid, she was an orange UNICEF box for Halloween, exactly to scale. Our senior year, Ann lived off campus on Green Street. She bought a purple inflatable bunny at the Woolworths on Nassau Street. Bunny had very memorable dinners one evening. So when Ann arrived in San Francisco around Easter in 1987, she found a purple bunny at Woolworths and left it on our front steps. She had arrived. Ann used her sense of design and perfection to create annual holiday greetings. They are always memorable and unique, though not always on time. For example, a handmade book called Curious George W. Goes to Washington, based on Curious George, and the best holiday mix 2 CD set that I know. So thanks to Nancy, those are some memories. Now, I had the privilege of meeting Ann again in San Francisco with a purple inflatable bunny as an introduction. She reminded me that she had actually dismantled my architecture desk and left it as a pile of boards on the floor. Perhaps that was just the kind of subtle hint that I needed to transfer to the visual arts program. Here was a woman who saw the truth and was not to be trifled with. Ann appreciated people's idiosyncrasies, and in me she struck gold. Perhaps it was my collection of round metal washers that I found across the city roads, or my common retort of, "What planet are you from?" which we shortened to, "What planet?" And we would exclaim in unison with a shared side eye at any time something struck us as odd. Ann did not suffer fools. If we have to have favorite buzzwords, authenticity is mine. Ann demanded it, and Ann lived it. Much gratitude, Ann, and thank you for the memories.
Greg is Sylvester? There we are, up front.
Good afternoon. I'm fortunate to have known Dave Kuhl, and I truly think I was blessed with Dave and Rich Bagger and Phil Morrison as roommates my junior and senior year here at Princeton. And Dave and I met first week of freshman year. We were both on the freshman crew team. I had never been in a boat before. And if you know Dave, he was sent to Princeton crew right out of Central Casting. So he was 6'7", lean, strong. His crew training had been at Haverford, which is a school on the main line in Philadelphia, and then he finished up in Santa Monica, California. And he was just dedicated, focused on, and fiercely competitive, which if you saw him in a normal role in life, you would not see that in Dave. But if you were in a boat, or Phil Jacobs, who said some beautiful things about Dave at a memorial service in New York, shared some stories about where that competitiveness came out. And that competitiveness not only made him a great oarsman, it made him just an incredible friend. And he had a joyous laugh. He was a proud member of Cap and Gown, so some people here may have had the pleasure of being with Dave when he was in a good mood, and he would have a laugh that you could just hear, all around the room. That his daughters, when we had the memorial service in New York, we sat with his daughters, and they wanted to hear stories, and they kept asking about the story about the face paint. And so there's a famous picture, well, at least famous to us, of Dave and I where we were opposing corner blows in blow pong. And that was one of the best days of my life, with Dave, and just the friendships that we had, and how well he took to just everybody around him. He was a chemistry major. I don't know how many people knew that, and probably one of the few chemistry majors that went to work for Price Waterhouse after school. So he went back to Southern California, and he got started with Price Waterhouse, and then he decided to go to University of Chicago for his MBA program. And that was truly transformational for Dave, and it was a good sign for us that we were going to be friends for a long, long time, because life's journey for both of us kept us together even after the times we spent at Princeton. At Chicago, Dave met a woman named Diane, who was a professional ballerina that was going to University of Chicago. And when you saw her next to Dave, you noticed the difference in size. But you certainly realized that she had that beauty and that sereneness about her, and that incredible strength of being a ballet dancer. But she was incredibly strong. And that strength served them both very well as they worked together to battle the lung cancer that eventually took Dave from us. After his MBA, he had a long career in treasury functions, and again, just sort of life keeping us together. He and his wife and their 2 daughters were expats in the Netherlands, the same time that my wife and I and our 3 children were expats in Hong Kong. And so we had the chance, due to my job, to travel to Europe on a pretty regular basis, and we're able to see Dave and Diane and Jenny and Katie, their 2 daughters. So I reached out to Jenny and Katie and asked them what they remembered most about their dad, and they wanted me to share at reunions. And it was amazing, because their request was to remind everybody here how much reunions meant to their father and how much it meant to them. So for about 10 years, Dave and Diane and the girls lived in Skillman, and so they were pretty regular visitors to, here to reunions. And they said that it was the happiest of times, and when they were here, and they could see in their own way the lifelong friends that their dad had made at this special place. So ask everybody to reflect on that, and to look for the joy in the fact that we're all together now and blessed to be together for these special days. Thank you.
My name is Larry Arata. I'm going to read a couple of passages about Doug Miller. The first one is from Ramo Biagioni, class 81. Doug attended Conestoga High School in suburban Philadelphia along with Don Parker, class 82. While at Princeton, he played football for 2 seasons, was a member of Cottage Club for 80-81, and was very active off campus with a local chapter of the Big Brothers of America. After graduating from Princeton in '82 with a degree in economics, he initially worked for a company in Connecticut. He then moved back to his hometown of Berwyn, PA in 1983 to care for his mom, who was afflicted with Huntington's. He continued to care for her even while attending the Wharton School of Business in late 1980s. During those years, he also played softball for the Princeton Club of Philadelphia from '84 through '87, along with fellow '82ers Jeff Idler and Phil Prosapio. After he earned his MBA, he moved to the D.C. area and worked for a land development for Pizza Hut, then with Trammell Crow, and finally for the National Association of Realtors. By the late 2000s, Doug began to exhibit the signs of Huntington's. He is survived by his daughter, Sarah, 3 siblings, and his wife, Meg. This is from Lee Campos. Lee and I roomed with Doug along with Chris Malick in our sophomore year. Doug roomed with Vern Stanfield his freshman year, and in his senior year, he roomed with Neil Kilgowny and Rob Schuersheim and Vinnie Baglio and Spellman. Doug loved his time with these guys and looked forward to seeing them at reunions over the years. Lee writes, we lost a good man a year ago for this past January. During his time at Princeton, Doug was a fun-loving student-athlete. He played 2 years in the football team where he made many good friends. As a student, Doug majored in economics. This background served him well later when he attended and graduated with an MBA from the Wharton School of Business. In turn, this education helped Doug land a job on K Street in Washington, D.C. Doug often spoke enthusiastically of his time in D.C. and later retired in Bethesda before later moving to the New York area. Indeed, we have lost a good man and he is missed. Huntington's has robbed Sarah Margaret of time together with her dad, as he should have been there for her as they grew older. We miss you, Doug. Goodbye, old friend. Close with a couple personal memories. He played for Conestoga High School in the Central League. I played for Harrah from the Central League. Played against him. I remember playing against him. He was fierce. He was a hitter. He was a defensive back. He was all Central, honored, and he played hard here at Princeton during his 2 years that he played for the football team. He loved to laugh. He loved to tell stories. He was a great friend, and he was fun to be around. And he was very smart and very hardworking. So, as Lee said, we'll miss you very much, Doug.
Thank you. Caroline?
We lost Amy Perlman to ovarian cancer last year. As Amy's Princeton roommates talked about how we wanted to remember her today, the word connection kept coming up. Amy had a deep desire to connecting with others. She had a gift for discerning the unique qualities in a person, and she used that gift to engage with others in meaningful ways. She was always guided by her clear understanding of the things that held meaning for her, and she built her life around those precious things. The most fundamental was her commitment to her family. Amy was deeply affected by the death of her only sibling, Sue, who died of breast cancer when Amy was 29. As a result of her family narrowing with her sister's death, Amy felt strongly about creating and expanding her own family. And when Amy felt strongly about something, she took it on as a project, and she made it happen. Amy married Scott in 1984. Theirs was a long, happy marriage, a true partnership. After several years of struggling with infertility, Amy and Scott had twin girls, Sarah and Rebecca. Their third, Mia, followed shortly thereafter. Her role as mom to the girls and as Scott's partner were paramount. Over the years, Amy found increased meaning in her faith, and her commitment to Judaism deepened. And I think this in some way ties into her gift for connection. Through her leadership roles in Hadassah and her synagogue, Amy established an extensive network of friends. She hosted huge, legendary seders for her family and those friends. Amy was the kind of person anyone would consider their closest friend because of her gift for connecting that made you feel that way. Amy had a lively, inquisitive mind, evidenced by her passion for art and travel. She entered Princeton as a chemical engineer, but quickly changed her major to art history. How often does that happen? She actually created spreadsheets for trips to Europe that detailed all the museums that she wanted to go to so that she could squeeze in just one more. For years, she served as a docent for the Taft Museum in Cincinnati, bringing to others her love of art. Amy was remarkable in so many ways, and this was evident even throughout her final illness. When she found out she was ill, she set up a journal on the Caringbridge website to provide regular updates to her large community of family and friends. Her 60-plus posts, which garnered over 20,000 views, were funny, pragmatic, and unflinchingly honest. Through those journal posts, she maintained her close connection with her wide circle of friends, providing profound and moving reflections on her life and relationships. I will leave you with an excerpt from a Caringbridge post from Amy that reflects her strength and her gift for connection. Basically, I can spend this part of my life saying, "Woe is me," over and over again. I will not be one bit happier or healthier for having done so. My relationships, new, old, rekindled, bedrock, all of great value to me, will not be one bit better off. I can't and won't get all Pollyanna-ish and tell you I'm going to come out of this a better person. Maybe I will, but frankly, I'd rather not be going through it at all, and I'd have been perfectly content to come through as a miserable, cranky sad sack. But with a long life ahead, with family who is grouchy and stuck with me, that would be a preferred outcome. However, that may not be in my cards, so I'm going to try to keep finding humor, compassion, and love where I find it, starting at home where it thrives and moving out in concentric circles. Where this elicits love, compassion, friendship, as a result, this is for the good. You guys, my concentric circles, enrich my life, and I'm grateful for that. And those of us in Amy's concentric circles, we who were enriched by our connections with her, are grateful for having known and loved her.
Michael Franklin Sly. Michael was born on May 2nd, 1960, in Virginia. He grew up in Long Branch, New Jersey, and graduated from Long Branch High School. At Princeton, he joined Charter Club, the National Society of Black Engineers, the Third Wall Center, and participated in varsity track and field. He majored in electrical engineering and computer science. In Michael's career, he was most passionate about and proud of the work he did for the Department of Defense. Michael served as an usher for many years at Fort Mammoth's Post Chapel before becoming an active member of First Presbyterian Church of Long Branch. He always looked forward to playing his part annually in the Living Last Supper. Michael was a very dedicated volunteer for PACE Mammoth, teaching pre-calculus, calculus, algebra 2, serving 11 years as math coordinator. He was instrumental in the success of the electrical engineering program, assisting in the classroom, organizing field trips, securing notable banquet guest speakers to inspire the students. Michael was a loving uncle and brother, avid bowler, huge fan of Chuck Maggione's music. Michael is survived by his sisters Margaret and Mary, 4 nieces, 1 nephew, 1 great-nephew, 1 great-niece. I'd now like to take some time to read a recent letter from Michael's sister that she wanted to share especially with you all. And she wanted to share some thoughts on Michael and his time at Princeton. And so Mary writes, "Those who knew Michael were well aware that he was born into a mixed-race family. When you grow up this way, you long to find people outside of your family just like you. Although we are all unique, sometimes our differences are so apparent and make you the subject of unfair judgment. A sense of belonging was very important to Michael's success. It was difficult being viewed as an enemy because your mother was Japanese or is Japanese. It's equally difficult being viewed as a subordinate or less intelligent by the mainstream America because your father is black. Being different was hard. Michael faced a lot of criticism growing up. Michael's acceptance to Princeton University was simply the result of him doing what he loved. He loved learning, and it came very easily to him. Michael appreciated the acceptance he found in Charter Club. It was a great way for him to socialize and make friends. He also enjoyed the camaraderie he found in the National Society of Black Engineers, like-minded people with similar goals. He found peace in the inclusive Third Wall Center, doing what he could to keep the pathways to success open for all who were deserving. I think, writes Mary, if Michael were here today, he would say that he is super proud to be a part of the community that continues to live out the values that they found in the early 80s. Coming from such a background, Michael would have said it was hard to understand the hate, division, and violence that swept through our country over the past couple of years. It was hard to understand the lack of civility during the pandemic. I think Michael would say thank you for contributing to that lack of understanding because of the respect you all have for him and the cohesiveness you have as a class. Love always, Mary. In closing, I would like to say it's an honor to stand before you speaking of our beloved classmate, Michael Sly. I vividly recall his quiet tenacity as a member of the Princeton chapter of the National Society of Black Engineers. I was its president. My reunion co-chair, David Stephen Hope, was vice president. My last conversation with Michael was at our 35th reunion. We talked and walked, and as he walked, he labored, breathing with his oxygen tank towards the gate. He shared his condition with me, and there was a peace that exuded from him as he spoke.
So the rain has ended. We have 5 minutes to close. Any classmate that would like to stand and remember any of the 41 of us that are no longer here, please stand.
This is for Lillian Tucker. There were days when she would call me and Lael, and we just pull over to the side of the road. Yeah, we pull over to the side of the road and have worship. So I just want to leave you with, you make me smile, you make me laugh, you make me feel good every day. You build me up when I am down. There's only heaven when you're around. And I can't go on this day feeling stronger every day, being too shy to say that I really love you.
I certainly cannot top that. That was very well done. I just wanted to do a real quick reminder, a remembrance to Gail Rutherford Williams. If any of you knew her, she was a very good soul. She was one of my best friends. Just wanted to share that her dream was to become a surgeon. Now, I'd mock her and say, with your small hands, there's no way you could be a surgeon. And then she compared her hands with mine, and mine were really not that much bigger either. But I had struck first. So I was very, very happy for her when she went to med school, got out, started her practice. Now, we would stay in touch every couple of years, email and then a phone call, until she did not reply. Took me a week to figure out, because she would usually get back to me sooner or later. And found out, I found a memorial on the internet, and was disappointed to learn that she had passed away. And I bring this out because if you knew Gail, she was a very, very good soul. She, I think, is one of the few individuals was truly colorblind. She knew people from everywhere in Princeton, and she really did get a chance to live her life, her dream, every day after she graduated. So I lost one of my best friends, and I think if you knew her, I think you would agree. Thank you. And condolences to all who have lost someone special in your lives. Thank you.
I think our time is drawing to an end. And Lael, oh, we have one more? We have, who was there? So one more, and then we're going to wrap it up. And, would I miss something? Okay. Lael? Yeah.
82 in the way that only you can do. Thank you for 82 in only the way that you can do. Thank you for sharing your memories and your thoughts, and even your quiet reflections that had no words. Thank you for sharing this space with us. And now we have an opportunity to individually think and reflect on what you've heard, what you've thought about. And I just want to encourage you to allow your thoughts to take you higher. So we'll take 82 seconds at my count and just pause to breathe and remember what you've heard. Thank you.